Hi everyone, I'm Andy. Welcome to Andy's Mindscape. This episode, we dive into a complex and bewildering Victorian poisoning case from England. The story officially begins on the 18th of April, 1875. Mr. Charles Bravo returned to his lavish Victorian bedroom late that fateful evening. He picked up the water carafe from the bedside table, poured himself a glass, and drank it all in one swift gulp. Drinking water before sleep was his established routine, but recently, Charles had been suffering agonizing, debilitating, throbbing pain in his tooth. To ensure a peaceful night, he rubbed a small amount of laudanum, an opiate painkiller, onto the aching spot and then climbed into bed. No sooner had he settled, an intense, searing, burning agony flared up inside his stomach and chest, instantly waking him. He rushed out of his room, crying out desperately, "Florence, Florence!" But his wife, Florence, seemed not to hear his desperate cries. It was Mary, the maid, who heard the commotion and ran out of her own quarters, witnessing Charles's terrible pallor. Mary immediately rushed to Florence's door, frantically knocking and shouting, "Mrs. Bravo, Mrs. Cox, please come quickly. Mr. Bravo is very ill." Hearing this story, the names Charles, Florence, and Cox must surely confuse you. What are their connections and relationships? To unravel this, we must dive into a dramatic and rather scandalous backstory. I must warn you, this section is long and detailed. The intertwined family connections are vital for understanding the motive and the eventual truth. So please, bear with us as we set the stage. First, let us introduce Florence, whose full name was Florence Campbell. She was born in 1845 in Sydney, Australia. Though born down under, her parents, Robert and Annie Campbell, were staunchly English. They had moved for the wool and gold trade. Campbell family business was extremely successful, quickly accumulating immense wealth, securing their status among the elite. Once they felt rich enough, the family returned to England, buying a massive estate in Oxfordshire and building a spectacular, luxurious home. The Campbells were unequivocally part of the highest social strata. As time passed, Florence reached a suitable age for marriage. As the daughter of the powerful Campbells, Florence did not possess the freedom to choose her own partner. Her parents would decide everything. Simply put, it was an arranged marriage. We often assume the husband was old, ugly, and rich, a trope common in fiction. The reality was quite the opposite. The Campbells selected a fine prospect, Alexander Ricardo, a standard high-status catch. Alexander's father was the influential Member of Parliament, John Lewis Ricardo. His mother, Catherine Duff, was the sister of the 5th Earl of Fife. The Earl of Fife held a prestigious hereditary aristocratic title in Britain, ranking among the highest nobility, even possessing the right to crown the king. The family's connections went beyond politics. John Ricardo founded the International Telegraph Company, demonstrating immense commercial power. Moreover, Alexander himself was tall, handsome, and impeccably presented. By today's standards, he was the perfect tall, rich, and handsome gentleman. The moment Florence first saw Alexander, she was instantly captivated by his undeniable charm and attractive demeanor. As the saying goes, the pursuit of a woman is difficult, but her pursuit of a man is effortless. The attraction was mutual and immediate. On the 21st of September 1864, 19-year-old Florence and 21-year-old Alexander married in a splendid ceremony, blessed by both families. Sadly, Alexander's father, John Ricardo, had already passed away, leaving Alexander a significant inheritance and a trust fund. The existence of this trust guaranteed the newlyweds a passive income of £3,000 a year, regardless of their work ethic. £3,000 may not sound like much now, but in 1864, the average family survived on about £28 annually. This sum was absolutely colossal. One would assume Florence and Alexander were set for a life of perpetual bliss and domestic harmony. Initially, Their married life was indeed idyllic. They rented the vast country estate of Holcombe Hall and hired dozens of servants for their daily needs. Unfortunately, this harmonious marriage lasted for only 3 years. The source of the friction: Alexander's military career. In those days, British soldiers were frequently dispatched overseas for various missions, often for long, unpredictable periods. Florence greatly disliked his profession, finding military life inherently unsafe and too disruptive for stable family life. Crucially, given their wealth, the work was unnecessary. Florence insisted her husband resign from the army immediately. Unable to withstand his wife's constant nagging and complaints, Alexander finally ended his military career in 1868, submitting to her wishes. He then attempted to involve himself in his family's business ventures. Yet, he soon realized he had almost no interest in them whatsoever. This lack of purpose, combined with virtually limitless money and youth, quickly led Alexander into a deep state of personal decline and dissipation. He began to drink heavily, allowing himself to sink into a perpetual stupor, constantly in a state of semi-drunkenness. Florence naturally responded to his alcoholism with arguments and bitter complaints, but her frustration failed to make him curb his drinking. In fact, his drinking only escalated. One day, fueled by alcohol, Alexander cruelly blamed Florence for destroying his entire life. Florence's sharp retort completely enraged him. Without hesitation, Alexander struck his wife, slapping her 3 times across the face. What refined woman, especially one raised in pampered luxury like Florence, could endure such a humiliating physical violation? That same evening, Christmas 1870, Florence packed her bags and fled her marital home, running straight back to her parents' estate. In Florence's heart, she felt the marriage to Alexander was irrevocably finished. Yet, divorce in that era was far from simple or acceptable. The ingrained traditional religious and social doctrines led Florence's parents to relentlessly urge their daughter to return to her husband. To their astonishment, every time they tried to persuade her, Florence reacted with overwhelming, uncontrollable hysteria, shocking her parents. Frightened by their daughter's state, the Campbells decided to halt all persuasion. They realized their daughter needed professional medical attention first. Thus, Florence was sent by her parents to a reputable hydropathic treatment center, a renowned sanitarium in Wales for recovery. This institution had immense prestige. Its director, Dr. James Gully, was not only the Campbells' family doctor, but also treated the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister himself had praised Dr. Gully as the most outstanding physician of his generation, making him famous across the UK and beyond. His signature method for treating psychological ailments was hydrotherapy, or water cure, believed to quickly relieve anxiety and tension. Whether one believes in the cure or not, Florence did feel significantly better, both mentally and physically, after a period of Dr. Gully's treatment. During this period, her husband, Alexander, visited her twice at the treatment center, but both times he arrived completely and visibly intoxicated. After learning the full history of Florence and Alexander's troubled marriage, Dr. Gully began to support the idea of their divorce. He argued that only a complete separation could fully cure Florence's psychological condition. Otherwise, she would certainly suffer a relapse. To help facilitate the separation, Dr. Gully even proactively contacted a solicitor on Florence's behalf, ready to initiate the complicated proceedings. Yet, tradition dictated one should save a marriage, not destroy it, especially when her own parents sent her to cool off and return home. How could the doctor encourage divorce when the parents intended reconciliation? If you think he acted purely for medical reasons, you are greatly mistaken. The old man was far from innocent. The truth, Dr. Gully, despite his respectable reputation, had developed a profound desire for Florence. Dr. Gully was already 62 and married, but his advanced age did not diminish his interest. His wife, 14 years his junior, had separated from him years ago. Since the separation, Dr. Gully had been living in his sanitarium like a confirmed bachelor. Seeing Florence, 37 years his junior, stirred him deeply. He was exceptionally attentive and considerate during her treatment. Florence found Dr. Gully kind, gentle, good-natured, and remarkably compliant to her every whim. Since her marriage, she had not felt such unconditional affection and attention from anyone. She craved this easy compliance and kindness. Though Dr. Gully was short, balding, and unattractive, a stark contrast to the handsome Alexander, he understood women's emotional needs intimately. And so, the elderly doctor and the young patient, despite their age difference, began a secret, passionate affair in the quiet seclusion of the sanitarium. Now the motive for his insistence on divorce is clear. Dr. Gully informed Florence his estranged wife was terminally ill and near death. Once his wife died and her divorce was final, they could legally and honorably be together. The plan, however, was violently and unexpectedly disrupted. Before Dr. Gully's wife could pass away, tragedy struck. In April 1871, Florence's husband, Alexander, died from excessive alcohol consumption. Though officially a sad event, Alexander's untimely death proved to be an immense boon for Florence, granting her immediate, unexpected freedom. First, she instantly regained her freedom. Secondly, Alexander left no new will, making Florence the sole heir to his substantial estate. This included £40,000 in cash, the £3,000 annual trust income, and a large, magnificent mansion in South London. Florence was overjoyed. With the mansion, she could finally indulge in her favorite hobbies, gardening and raising fine horses in the surrounding lands. Just 2 weeks after her husband's death, she confidently moved into the Grand London house, hiring a full staff of 13 servants. Her staff included 3 maids, a cook, a butler, a coachman, a footman, 2 laborers, 3 gardeners, and a personal maid, Jane Cox. Sharp viewers will recognize the name Jane Cox, a pivotal character in the opening scene. Let me briefly introduce her background. Though English, Jane Cox had spent her early years in Jamaica with her husband. Tragically, her husband passed away relatively early. Returning to England with her 3 children, she took the position as Florence's lady's maid. Now, let me pose a question to the audience. With Alexander dead, who, besides Florence, was the happiest person alive? Correct. It was undoubtedly Dr. James Gully. The old doctor, who had long desired Florence, now saw her inheriting a vast fortune, making her even more desirable and irresistible. He closed his sanitarium and promptly moved to London, purchasing a house called Orwell Lodge, establishing his new life near her. What made this new residence special? Its location. Orwell Lodge was specifically chosen for its extreme proximity, just a 5-minute walk from Florence's mansion. Because of this convenient proximity, Florence would sneak out of her house in the dead of night, after the servants had retired, to meet with the old man. However, with a household staff of 13, it was only a matter of time before the mistress's frequent nocturnal escapades were inevitably discovered. Although such illicit behavior was socially unacceptable, the servants, to preserve their valuable employment, dared not speak a word of their mistress's indiscretion. As time went on, Florence and Dr. Gully grew bolder. In May 1872, they took a huge, reckless chance. Florence traveled to Surrey for a weekend visit with Brooks, a family lawyer and old friend of the Campbells. Coincidentally, Dr. Gully was also in Surrey that weekend, and Florence, perhaps carelessly, invited him to join the weekend party at Brooks's house. Brooks, pleased to host a social celebrity like Dr. Gully, initially enjoyed the conversation in his drawing room, the mood pleasant and relaxed. Then, Brooks excused himself for a moment, needing to use the restroom. The moment the host left, the old doctor and Florence embraced passionately. Worse, they were so lost in their private embrace that they failed to notice Brooks quietly returning to the drawing room. The lawyer froze in shock. As a loyal friend to the Campbell family, Brooks's immediate action was to inform Florence's parents of the shocking, blatant indiscretion. Campbells were absolutely furious, their anger driving them to a series of rash, regrettable, and emotional decisions. First, the Campbells stripped Dr. Gully of his position as their family physician, effectively firing him from all his medical duties for the family. Secondly, they began to publicly denounce Dr. Gully, declaring him a lecherous opportunist who was corrupting their innocent daughter. Almost overnight, Dr. James Gully's decades-long meticulously built reputation was utterly destroyed, transforming the renowned doctor into a notorious old rogue. Ostensibly, the Campbells had achieved their revenge. However, they failed to anticipate the severe damage this scandal would inflict upon their own daughter. The old saying, "It takes two to tango," rang true. Gully was disgraced, but in the public eye, Florence was equally culpable for the affair. As the scandal spiraled, the first reaction came from the staff at Florence's London mansion. They had known of her lack of propriety, but it had been a secret. Now that the affair was public knowledge, they feared the social stigma and repercussions, leading them all to submit their immediate resignations en masse. Losing the servants compounded the crisis. Those previously bound by the duties of employment were now free to speak openly about Florence's conduct. The curious public soon realized it was truly unclear who had initially seduced whom in the scandalous, complex relationship. Adding fuel to the media fire, a former maid from Dr. Gully's sanitarium stepped forward to offer a devastating exposé. She sensationally claimed that Florence and Dr. Gully had been involved during her treatment, before Alexander's death, and she had witnessed them intimate. To cover up the affair, the maid claimed Dr. Gully had paid her a substantial sum for her silence. This was the final inflammatory spark. Since Alexander had still been alive, Florence was technically guilty of adultery. The British press exploded with the juicy, explosive scandal. The prestigious Times newspaper even published a scathing editorial labeling Florence a selfish, willful, and immoral adulteress and a terrible wife. The weight of public condemnation was crushing. Faced with the overwhelming negativity, Florence finally decided to break off the relationship with Dr. Gully. She did not sever ties completely, however. She told Gully she wished to return their relationship to a professional, patient-doctor level for now. She offered a sliver of hope. Perhaps after the turmoil fully subsided, she would reconsider the possibility of resuming their romantic involvement. Despite Florence's decision, the social uproar continued unabated, plunging her into a state of profound depression and deep despair. Witnessing her mistress's agony, the devoted personal maid, Jane Cox, became deeply concerned and urgently sought a solution to salvage the situation. In the rigid confines of the Victorian era, Cox believed the best remedy for the scandal was a new marriage, a respectable union to overshadow the past. The future husband Cox selected for her mistress was Charles Bravo. Though less affluent than Alexander, Charles was far from insignificant. The Bravo family had established themselves as colonial merchants in Jamaica, making Charles affluent, though not excessively wealthy by London standards. Born in 1845, the same year as Florence, Charles was well educated, a graduate of Oxford, King's College, and actively working as a successful lawyer. His appearance was also commendable. He possessed the standard, refined image of a proper, handsome English gentleman of the era. By all conventional measures, Charles Bravo and Florence were an excellent, socially acceptable match. Now, the twist of fate. During her early years in Jamaica, Jane Cox had cultivated a strong friendship with Charles Bravo's family. This connection proved invaluable. Using this bond, Cox tirelessly played matchmaker, working hard to bring the two seemingly perfect individuals together. Matchmaking was successful. Charles and Florence quickly developed a mutual attraction and romantic connection, which rapidly intensified. They soon moved in together, and Charles moved into Florence's luxurious mansion, fostering an even greater acceleration of their burgeoning feelings. On the 7th of December 1875, Charles and Florence were married in a grand ceremony at a church in Kensington, officially becoming husband and wife. To the outside world, it appeared Florence's new, happy chapter had finally begun, putting the scandal and old disgrace firmly behind her. In reality, however, this new marriage was fraught with underlying tensions and the seeds of inevitable future crises. Their courtship had been brief, leaving their understanding of one another superficial and their emotional foundation fragile and undeveloped. Also, a crucial question looms. Charles was undoubtedly aware of Florence's highly publicized, scandalous affair with Dr. Gully. In Victorian society, marrying a widow was already frowned upon. Marrying a scandalous, publicly disgraced widow was even more detrimental to one's reputation. Charles was a respected gentleman. He was not a desperate man. Was his motivation truly love, or was something more practical at the heart of the union? Evidently, his primary focus was Florence's immense fortune. Florence knew his reasons but was indifferent, having her own agenda to fulfill. Her goal was to use the marriage to Charles as a social shield, finally silencing the relentless public criticism and media condemnation. Ultimately, both had deeply personal, hidden agendas. But a third problem also shadowed their union: the brooding presence of Dr. James Gully. Florence's conditional breakup with Gully left him waiting for reconciliation. The news of her marriage to Charles crushed the doctor's hopes. Considering these complex factors, was a happy ending ever possible for this hastily formed, troubled marriage? The answer, tragically, was no. Problems began just 2 weeks after the wedding. Charles received an anonymous poison pen letter, calling him a gold digger who married for money. Charles was furious, convinced the letter was sent directly by the jealous and vengeful Dr. Gully. His suspicion instantly poisoned their new life. As the saying goes, some people and issues are best left untouched. Now that the issue was openly discussed, the damage was done. Following Jane Cox's advice, Charles eventually burned the letter, but the accusation had planted a deeply rooted seed of suspicion and distrust in his heart. The emotional poison quickly took hold, escalating the strain on the couple's fragile relationship and manifesting in his financial demands. Charles demanded full control of the household finances, including managing all of Florence's property. This was a common, expected Victorian custom. Florence, fiercely protective of her independence and wealth, adamantly refused his demand to relinquish financial authority. Charles initially backed down, believing he could wait and eventually assert his control, thinking that time was on his side. Soon, Charles discovered a serious problem. Florence's spending habits were extravagant. The annual £3,000 trust fund barely covered her luxury expenses. Charles was appalled, he thought. If she spends like this, the fortune will vanish. If there's no money left, why did I marry her in the first place? Conflict over money erupted into open warfare. Charles constantly argued with Florence about her exorbitant expenditures. Florence was equally unyielding, asserting that her spending was her prerogative and that she was certainly not spending Charles's money. Charles, utterly enraged and losing all restraint, began to use cruel, cutting words, frequently bringing up her shameful, past affair with Dr. Gully. Florence's fury exploded at this dredging up of old history. She declared he could live alone and promptly retreated to her parents' home once more. Charles, realizing his mistake, panicked and desperately sent a barrage of apologetic letters to his mother-in-law, pleading for Florence's speedy return. However, Charles's apology was insincere. While Florence was away, he took action. He couldn't control her spending, so he controlled the household expenses. Florence's luxurious staff was excessive for only 2 people. Charles took the opportunity to secretly dismiss several of the domestic servants to cut costs. From Florence's perspective, she was initially not ready to forgive Charles, but she soon discovered she was pregnant, a game-changing event. Her parents urged her to return, seeing the child as a reason to reconcile. For the sake of the baby, Florence agreed to go back to her husband. Upon her return, her fragile peace shattered. She discovered Charles had unilaterally dismissed her servants. The old vicious arguments resumed immediately. The prolonged stress and continuous fighting eventually took their inevitable toll, and Florence sadly suffered a miscarriage. This tragedy only added another layer of devastating bitterness to the already poisonous relationship between husband and wife. Charles, however, refused to relent. He suspected Jane Cox was fueling Florence's defiance and actively inciting their quarrels. Since he had already dismissed so many, he decided to dismiss Cox as well. But he failed to recognize Cox's unique and critical position. Cox was not just any maid. She was Florence's indispensable personal maid, a confidante, a position similar to a powerful vizier in a queen's court. Florence was instantly enraged by this trespass. She informed Charles that if he dared to fire Cox, she would strip him of his husbandly duties. Her words were not empty threats. Florence immediately banished Charles from their shared bed, forcing him to sleep in a separate guest room. Furthermore, due to her recent miscarriage and need for care, Florence requested that Jane Cox move into her room to attend to her needs overnight. Time fast forwards to the morning of the 18th of April, 1875. Charles, feeling restless, decided to ride one of Florence's horses out for some leisure. But upon his return, the horse was gone, and Charles was badly injured and visibly bruised. He had been thrown when the horse bolted. Despite their terrible relationship, Florence fulfilled her wifely duty. She bathed Charles and ensured he was comfortable in his separate guest room. By dinner, Charles had recovered sufficiently to eat downstairs and have a few glasses of wine before retiring early to his separate room. Then came the moment we saw at the start: Charles's sudden internal combustion shortly after he went to bed. When Mary, the maid, knocked on Florence's door, it was Jane Cox who answered. She calmly inquired what the terrible commotion was about. Florence, Cox claimed, was already asleep. After Mary briefly explained Charles's agonizing condition, Cox immediately rushed to Charles's guest room. When Charles saw Cox enter, he tried to speak but collapsed violently to the floor, convulsing in intense, agonizing pain. Cox instantly instructed Mary to fetch water from downstairs and told the coachman to urgently summon Dr. Harrison, the nearest available physician. Mary, the shrewd maid, suspected Charles's condition was dire. After delivering the water to Cox, she ran to Florence's room to wake her mistress. Florence was understandably distraught. She followed Mary to Charles's room and anxiously asked Cox if a doctor had been summoned. Cox confirmed that she had dispatched the coachman to fetch Dr. Harrison. Florence immediately countered, stating Harrison lived too far away. She quickly ordered another servant to ride into town to summon a closer physician, Dr. Moore. Both doctors arrived in quick succession, Moore arriving 20 minutes earlier. The doctors examined Charles and agreed his situation was extremely critical, but they were utterly baffled by the cause of his sudden, violent illness. Though they suspected poisoning, after questioning Charles about his day's activities, they concluded the symptoms did not match any known, common toxins. Florence then suspected internal injuries from his horse riding accident that morning. She ordered another doctor to be summoned immediately. She called for Dr. Royce Bell, a highly renowned surgeon and, coincidentally, Charles's cousin. Bell arrived late that night, the 19th of April, at 2:30 a.m. Bell was not alone. He brought a colleague, Dr. George Johnson, the president of the Royal College of Surgeons, one of London's most esteemed physicians. These two, with their superior medical insight, immediately concluded that Charles was indeed suffering from a potent, swift, acting poison. However, like the others, they could not identify the specific toxin. Bell leaned in while his cousin was lucid, asking what he consumed that evening. Charles confirmed he ate the same dinner as everyone else. The only other thing was the laudanum he applied to his tooth, before going to bed. Bell was baffled. Laudanum could not cause this. To be thorough, he examined the laudanum bottle, finding no anomalies or contamination. It was at this crucial moment that Jane Cox mysteriously pulled Dr. Bell aside, taking him privately into the drawing room to reveal a secret. Cox confessed that the first time she checked on Charles, he had whispered a shocking private message. "I took the poison myself. Don't tell Florence." Bell was horrified. He immediately summoned the other 3 doctors and relayed the startling suicide confession from Charles via Cox. Dr. Harrison was instantly furious, chastising Cox for the delay. He argued that if they had known sooner, they could have induced vomiting to mitigate the effects. Cox, however, claimed she had indeed told Harrison the moment he arrived. Harrison vehemently denied any recollection of that crucial exchange. It was not the time for squabbling. The 4 doctors urgently returned to Charles's room to try once more to identify the toxin. To protect Charles's privacy, they did not reveal Cox's confession. They pressed him again on what he had eaten, focusing on small, overlooked details. Charles could only repeat his earlier statement. If it wasn't the laudanum, he truly had no idea what could have caused his sudden, agonizing illness. Helpless, the doctors resorted to taking samples of Charles's vomit to analyze them overnight. Dr. Bell remained at the mansion to monitor his cousin. Bell, knowing the truth of the suicide claim, did not deceive Charles about his condition. He urged his cousin to quickly write his last will and testament. Charles simply wrote one single final sentence: "I leave all my property to my wife, Florence, and appoint her as my sole executor." At 4 p.m. on the 19th of April, Charles' parents and Florence's parents arrived at the mansion. Dr. Bell grimly informed them there was no hope left. As Bell predicted, Charles Bravo died at 5:20 a.m. on the 20th of April, 1875, having suffered for 55 excruciating hours. The precise cause of death remained a total mystery until the analysis was complete. Nobody knew what deadly substance had finally killed him. Because Charles's death was clearly unnatural, Dr. Bell immediately contacted a coroner, Joseph Payne, who organized an inquest with the 4 attending physicians. On the 28th of April, 1875, the final autopsy report and the vomit analysis were finally released to the public and the investigating parties. The examination revealed Charles Bravo's true cause of death: antimony poisoning tane. The specific toxin was Sufi tartar emetic antimony potassium tartrate. This substance, a soluble white powder, is highly toxic. Only 4 grains are needed to be lethal, but 30 to 40 grains were found in Charles's stomach. With the report's confirmation, local police and the court initiated a full criminal investigation into the mysterious poisoning case. Shockingly, just a few days after the report's release, the court publicly closed the case, issuing an incomprehensible verdict. Jury representative declared that while the victim died of antimony poisoning, the court could not determine favorine, wine, or how the poison entered the body. The entire process was astonishingly unsatisfying and left the public bewildered. Charles's family, in particular, felt the judgment was deeply irresponsible. They refused to believe their son committed suicide and were convinced he was deliberately murdered. They were determined to find the real culprit. Charles's father penned a lengthy emotional letter to Scotland Yard, imploring them to dispatch an officer to reinvestigate the complex case. Scotland Yard, agreeing the case was too suspicious to close, assigned Chief Inspector Clark to officially reopen the investigation. Inspector Clark proved meticulous. He immediately issued a detailed questionnaire to all key participants and every servant in Florence's household. The survey questions were detailed, focusing primarily on the specific dynamics and tensions within Charles and Florence's volatile marriage. Simultaneously, Clark's men began a systematic search of every chemist and pharmacy in the surrounding local area to track the poison's origin. Florence, surprisingly, cooperated fully. She willingly answered Clark's questions and permitted a thorough search of every corner of her mansion. She even published an advertisement in major newspapers, offering a hefty £500 reward for any information leading to the poisoner's identification. Substantial reward proved effective. A local pub owner contacted the police, providing a valuable initial lead in the baffling case. The owner claimed that before the death, a man named George Griffiths had told him that Charles Bravo might die soon. This alarming tip led the police to immediately initiate a full investigation into George Griffiths, and their suspicions were immediately raised. First, George Griffiths had a clear motive. He was Florence's former coachman, whom Charles had dismissed as part of his cost-cutting efforts. More crucially, Inspector Clark discovered from a local chemist that George had recently purchased a significant quantity of tartar emetic. Surely, the culprit was George, the dismissed coachman with the motive and the means. Clark immediately located and brought George in for questioning. The interrogation, however, delivered a shocking surprise that completely undermined the police's initial, confident theory. George was completely cooperative, freely admitting to both the pub statement and the large purchase of tartar emetic without any hesitation. Crucially, he provided a surprisingly rational and compelling explanation for all his actions, shattering the police's neat narrative. George explained that after his dismissal, Charles had been bitten by a dog. He spoke the curse in the pub out of resentment, hoping Charles would die of rabies. The tartar emetic was equally simple. As a coachman, he had cared for Florence's horses. The substance, in small doses, promotes equine digestion. He claimed that he had not used all the poison when he was dismissed. The remaining quantity was stored and forgotten inside the stable tack room. Police confirmed George's story was substantially true, and, most importantly, he had a clear alibi for the night of the poisoning. Despite George's exoneration, the police noted one small anomaly. The remaining tartar emetic was nowhere to be found inside the stable tack room. With George cleared, Inspector Clark was completely confounded. The investigation was not hitting a dead end, but rather an overwhelming, complex impasse. Clark realized his questionnaires and extensive searching had revealed too many suspects with too much motive, creating a difficult web of blame. Florence was clearly under suspicion due to her volatile relationship with Charles, and the public even suspected she may have poisoned her first husband, Alexander. Dr. James Gully was also a prime suspect. Charles's marriage crushed his hopes, and he was known to have cursed Charles, a doctor with access to drugs. Finally, the indispensable personal maid, Jane Cox, had a strong motive for revenge after Charles tried to cruelly terminate her employment. Some argued that with so many suspects, all Clark needed to do was investigate each one, but the problem was the total lack of concrete evidence for any of them. The only minor lead was a report that Cox and Dr. Gully had secretly met several times, just before the poisoning incident occurred. Cox, however, offered a plausible, ready explanation. She had met with Gully only to seek restorative medicine for Florence, who was recovering from her miscarriage. Clandestine meetings were necessary, she claimed, because she feared Charles would become angry if he learned she was seeking help from his rival. With strong motives and no conclusive evidence, Inspector Clark felt completely overwhelmed. The crime was clearly murder, but he couldn't name the killer. Faced with this deadlock, Clark finally decided to present the entire, confusing web of circumstantial evidence to the jury and let them decide. On the 11th of July, 1876, the murder trial's main hearing began. Clark unleashed every possible suspect and every piece of information he had collected. Clark's desperate tactic led to two immediate dramatic consequences in the public domain, causing immense social turmoil. First, Florence's entire scandalous past and her volatile private life were once again exposed to the public in agonizing, humiliating detail. Second, the sheer volume of complex information meant the hearing, initially planned for 4 days, dragged on for a staggering 26 days. One might hope the lengthy deliberation would produce a definitive result, but the jury's final verdict, yet again, left the public completely frustrated. After 26 grueling days, the jury representative announced, "We find that Mr. Charles Bravo did not die by suicide or accident, but was poisoned by tartar emetic." However, they concluded, "But we find no sufficient evidence to affix the guilt of the crime upon any particular person." The case was a legal failure. The very next day, Florence sold the grand mansion inherited from Alexander, dismissed her remaining servants, and moved to a quiet seaside town in Hampshire. Tragically, on the 17th of September 1878, just 3 years after Charles's death, Florence died from alcohol poisoning due to excessive drinking. Jane Cox, the faithful maid, moved to Birmingham to live with her sister after the mansion was sold. Dr. Gully fled England and disappeared into Austria. Though Charles Bravo's murder remains officially unsolved, the lives of almost every person connected to the baffling case were irrevocably ruined. This concludes the facts of the case. Now, let's move to the most highly anticipated section, our personal analysis and speculation on the identity of the true killer. First, we must address the enduring question: is it possible Charles committed suicide? The theory has persisted throughout the century-old mystery. The arguments for suicide rest primarily on 2 points: Jane Cox's testimony and Charles's surprisingly calm, accepting demeanor before his death. These points convinced some that Charles had taken his own life, perhaps overwhelmed by his marital and financial despair. I, however, disagree with the suicide theory. Charles lacked a fundamental motive to end his own life so dramatically. His conflict with Florence was exclusively about money. He was an affluent lawyer, not an impoverished, desperate man with nowhere else to turn. If he truly could not leverage her money, he could simply divorce her and move on. His financial status didn't necessitate self-destruction. As for his calm demeanor, medical experts have explained that antimony poisoning often causes confusion, depression, and fide ennui, a sense of world weariness. Therefore, Charles's tranquil acceptance of his fate was a perfectly normal symptom of the very poison that was killing him. Suicide is highly unlikely. So, the likely scenario is murder. Let us now examine the 3 main suspects, beginning with Florence herself. Could Florence be the killer? I find it improbable. Her conflict with Charles was a common domestic dispute over financial control. There was no profound, bitter hatred between them. If the differences were truly unbearable, a divorce was an easier, simpler solution than murder. If not Florence, then what about the spurned lover, Dr. James Gully? Did he murder Charles out of vengeance and possessiveness? I also find Gully an unlikely killer. The public scandal had permanently separated him and Florence. Even she was willing. Her parents were not. Gully was an old man, not an impulsive youth. It is highly doubtful he would commit such a risky, dramatic act of revenge against a remote rival. Furthermore, successfully poisoning Charles would have been difficult. Gully had no reason or natural access to the highly guarded mansion or Charles's private rooms. That leaves us with the 3rd suspect, the one with the strongest motive and the easiest access, Jane Cox, the personal maid. What was Cox's motive? It was powerful and immediate. Charles had tried to fire her, threatening her entire family's financial security. Charles's attempt to dismiss her was an act of brutal indifference, threatening to sever the lifeline that supported her and her 3 fatherless children. Cox had worked hard to arrange the marriage, only to be betrayed and nearly discarded by the man she elevated. This was a clear case of professional revenge. But Charles failed to dismiss her, you might argue. Did this single attempt at firing truly motivate murder? Yes, because Cox saw the long game. With Alexander gone, Cox was indispensable, but with Charles as the husband, her position was inherently temporary, dependent on the couple's relationship. If Charles and Florence reconciled, Cox would quickly be demoted to a simple maid, Or worse, Charles would succeed in firing her later on. Cox realized she had to eliminate the threat to secure her indispensable role. The motive was not just revenge, but survival and self-preservation. Question remains, how did Cox administer the poison, given that Charles claimed he only consumed laudanum and water before his collapse? Charles had a habit of drinking water before sleep, pouring it from a carafe in his room. The doctors checked the water, and it came back clean. But remember the crucial detail. When Charles was poisoned, Cox immediately ordered the maid, Mary, to fetch water from downstairs. Why send Mary downstairs when there was clearly water in Charles's room? I believe Cox used the moment of panic to switch the carafe and the glass. She needed Mary out of the way for a few crucial moments. She eliminated the poisoned evidence while framing Charles's supposed last drink as clean. Why did she whisper the suicide claim suitably to Dr. Bell, waiting until a top physician arrived? The delay was intentional. First, she feared an early confession might allow the first doctors to save Charles, undoing her work. Second, antimony poisoning symptoms take time to become conclusive. She waited until Charles was deep in the confusion and depression induced by the antimony, making his confession to her more plausible to Dr. Bell. How did Cox, the maid, know about the specific effects of antimony poisoning? Remember those secret meetings with Dr. Gully? I believe Cox met with Gully, not for medicine, but to acquire the poison and learn how to use it, perhaps even by claiming Florence wanted to poison Charles. That concludes our analysis. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a like and consider subscribing. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.